called the Bishop of Birmingham. There once were 3 girls from Birmingham, and this is the story concerning them. They lifted the frock and diddled the cock of the bishop that was confirming them. But the bishop was nobody's fool. He'd been to a large public school. He lowered his britches and fucked those 3 bitches with a 12-inch Episcopal tool. Then up jumped the young lady from Glue and said, "Bishop, it really is true that the vicar is quicker and slicker and thicker and longer and stronger than you."
There we go.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Was that over the top? Okay. You are familiar with limericks, and you know they're all. I've actually got one that I won't tell if they're female, and so be thankful.
And that's not the worst.
It's about a girl from the Azores. I'll leave it at that. You can speculate all you want to. Come on in! We stand here looking lost. We're all lost.
It's dark in here. It's just hard to see.
We're all in search of something. Occasionally we find things, and it's kind of like loading guineas on a flatbed. You find something and something falls off. You know what a guinea is? It's not an Italian. I used that one time in New York and almost got my ass kicked. But a guinea, as we know in the South, is this little guinea fowl that's like a chicken on methadone, you know. You can imagine trying to load a bunch of them on a flatbed truck. So loading guineas on a flatbed is a metaphor for, you know, you put something on, it's a metaphor for the Allman Brothers band. And don't ask me what a metaphor is, because I got a good comeback for that too. It's for keeping sheep in. What's a metaphor? Keeping sheep in which you keep sheep. You don't end sentences in prepositions.
It's true, I looked it up.
Huh?
I said it's true, I looked it up.
What time be it be?
1137.
Oh hell! Well, I'm gonna start. Okay? All right.
We're here.
This is, oh boy.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
I think the dynamics just changed, folks. Sorry. Hey, darling.
Hello.
I hope those boys are worldly.
You boys are going to be lots of swearing.
Well, part of this thing is not going to be absolutely what they're going to hear in school.
Okay.
And in fact, if they say it in school, they'd probably get expelled.
So should I?
But I'll try to leave out F words and that kind of stuff.
But Butch, if you're uncomfortable.
No, it's okay as long as you know. I'm just warning you
Already.
that there is going to be one story in here. I won't use anything too, but whatever.
I know. Don't censor on the app like this.
Okay.
No sense.
Well, you just got spared a lot of cussing. That's my natural tone. But we're going to get started. This is something I put together, or me and Mike over here. As you heard yesterday, Mike is really the instigator of this, and then he and I came up here. And the first year that we did this in 2013, this was my presentation, and I called this Fishing with Dwayne. It'll take a while for me to get there, but at some point you'll figure out why I call it that. And this is really, I put this together as my tribute to the most powerful man I've ever known. Had I not met Duane Allman, I would be a retired math teacher from high school somewhere at this point in my life. And I'm not kidding. That's where I was headed. I was headed off to math, get a degree in math when Dwayne knocked at my door, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I want, this is what Dwayne wrote in his notebook, and you can see the date. About 3 months later is when he knocked at my door and began the process that led to the Allman Brothers band. But you can read it. This year I will be more thoughtful of my fellow man. Exert more effort in each of my endeavors, professionally as well as personally. Take love wherever I find it and offer it to everyone who will take it. In this coming year, I will seek knowledge from those wiser than me and try to teach those who wish to learn from me. I love being alive. Damn. And I will be the best man I possibly can. This is a 21-year-old guy. And gives you a little insight into what was between his ears and a little bit of insight in what was in his heart and who he was, you know. And as things progress, you will see more and more of what I'm talking about. Go on. And this is it. Title page. Move on. This leads, you saw the shirt I was wearing yesterday. Mike made for me. That's what it said. And this leads into something that we'll get into later on, which you may get very bored with, but, you know, I have, go on. We'll get there in a minute. Hey, lose that crap at the top. Okay. Well, okay, we're going to jump right into it. All right. We'll get into the deeper part of this thing right here. And I'll start it off with... Yeah, okay, well it makes sense because this is what Dwayne and I used to do. Dwayne and I were both avid readers. When I first got in the Allman Brothers band, I was reading science fiction, you know, Arthur C. Clarke, Rogers and Lasby, Asimov, people like that. And there's a lot of good literature in science fiction. And then it's really ironic, but the very first day we got to Macon, Georgia, and began rehearsal putting together the Allman Brothers was the day I opened for the first time Fellowship of the Ring, which was the first of about 25 readings. I used to do it every spring for about 12 years. It was a rite of spring for me, was to reread Tolkien. And I turned Dwayne on to Tolkien, and as some of you may know, his daughter's name is Galadriel. So obviously he liked Tolkien too. So what Dwayne and I used to do is on a day off, he and I would go find a lake somewhere and go buy a couple of cheap rod and reels and some plastic worms, and we go sit on the side of the lake and talk for about an hour about the books we're reading and about life and about the band and, you know, things like that. And then Dwayne was the first one, because he was just finishing Tolkien. I was ahead of him on that. And I was kind of looking for a place to go, and Dwayne found that quote from Nietzsche, "Without music, life would be a mistake." So he told me that, and we looked at each other and said, you know, anybody that would say that, that's worth reading. So he and I dove right into, any of you read Nietzsche or familiar with Nietzsche at all? Okay, well, I'm sure you've heard some things about Nietzsche, but I have to go to my notes here. Now, where are they? Damn it, now I need light. There you go. That'll do it. Thank you. All right, so we dove right into Nietzsche's magnum opus, which is called Also Sprach Zarathustra. And this was really cool that he was reading this stuff that was pretty deep for him and me too. And when we would sit down and talk about it, he would come up with some insights that I wouldn't have. I would come up with the insights that he wouldn't have. And between the two of us, we made some sense out of what Nietzsche was saying. And there are certain things that Nietzsche is known for. People believe that he said that life, that humans have gone beyond good and evil, which led to philosophers like Michel Foucault, who just said, yeah, you know, good and evil is nothing but something we created so that one group of people can have power over another group of people. And he went all the way to say, open all the prisons and let them all out. You know, that's nothing but a will to power by one group over another group. But what Dwayne and I discovered is that is not what Nietzsche said. What Nietzsche really said was anything done for love is beyond good and evil. It's really a quite different statement. And I'll just leave Nietzsche there. And then we moved on to John Locke. And would anybody have any idea why we would do that? Okay, you're getting a little bit of college education, and trust me, this won't last too long, so try to hang with me. But there were three major philosophers that informed the creation of the United States and the Constitution. John Locke, for his absolute, and John Locke was a profound Christian, but he understood all of the horrors of the medieval times when the church, the Catholic Church, had control of not only the religion but government. And if you didn't agree with them, you got tortured. Taz! We got a star. He has to return it to the home of his beginning. Welcome, my bro. We just jammed at B.B. King's a few days ago. And that boy's gotten a whole lot better in the last 3 years.
Thank you.
You're turning into a musician, my man.
Thanks so
I'm
much.
proud of you. So anyway, back to the point. We'll finish this stuff. But, so John Locke was the first one that wrote very profoundly about how if you're going to have any representational form of government, then the church and the state has to be totally separate. And I don't give a damn what these right-wingers are telling you right now. That is the absolute basis of the U.S. Constitution. There is nothing more fundamental to the United States of America than the separation of church and state. But John Locke was born right as the Inquisition was ending. And he knew how horrible it was when religion is in control of the government. And so this country was founded on that, and we are drifting away from it. So every one of us, if you want to hold on to what is left of any form of democracy, you got to fight this with everything you have. I don't care how much you believe in Jesus Christ or Mohammed, but it doesn't matter. You have to understand that everybody has their own right to their own way of living, and your truth ain't necessarily the truth. Okay? That's the basis of John Locke that Dwayne and I were drawn to. And then when Dwayne died, we were right in the middle of reading Rousseau. It was one of those that you see up there. And Rousseau, just fundamentally, I mean, Rousseau was the philosopher of the 80s. I mean, if there ever was one. He learned about, you know, the guys that were coming to the United States who had discovered the Native Americans here, who somehow became Indians. And you know why they're called Indians, right? Because Columbus thought he was an Indian. It's really not a good word to use. It's not, you know. It's like redskin or whatever. They're not Indians. They're native. We use the PC term Native Americans, but they prefer Navajo, Cherokee, whatever tribe they come from. At least most of them that I've talked to. And but also what Rousseau wrote about that fundamentally informed me and Dwayne is that there is a certain inevitable up and down curve to every dominant civilization that ever has been. When you go back to Rome at the time of Julius Caesar, do y'all know why Julius Caesar was killed? Huh?
You want too much power?
No.
No?
That's what most people think. And that's what the people that were in control of Rome at the time tried to put out, that he tried to make himself a tyrant, and they were killing a tyrant. That's what John Wilkes Booth yelled when he jumped down after shooting Abraham Lincoln. I've killed a tyrant. He was quoting the Romans, but that is not what it was about at all. I mean, at the time, Julius Caesar came from 7 years of fighting the Gallic Wars, the richest man in Rome, because of all the loot and everything. He had promised a piece of property to every single soldier in his legions in Italy. There was one big problem. There were roughly 400 families that owned all that land. And Cassius and Brutus were the leaders of that group that stabbed him, were part of those aristocrats that owned it all. And they killed him because they said, screw you, you ain't taking our property. And Julius Caesar was very much about returning Rome to a republic and giving the power back to the Senate, ergo giving the power back to the people. Come on, guys, is it that boring? Are y'all at all interested in this?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I don't expect applause, but get up and leave and shit.
Just get water.
Okay, so anyway, I mean, Rousseau laid it out how this always happened. It happened to Rome, it happened to France. Just, Marie Antoinette said, she was told that, everybody's starving. She said, let them eat cake. A couple of weeks later, they chopped her head off. And right now, if you look at the similarities between Rome in 40 BC, which is when Julius Caesar was killed, and the United States right now, we got roughly 400 families that own 70% of the wealth in this country. And they're getting more and more and more and more of it every goddamn day. And the longer Citizens United stays up there, and if there is any reason, and if there's no other reason that you must vote Democrat this time, it's because these assholes in the Congress right now are totally going against the Constitution by refusing to even look at Barack Obama's appointment to the Supreme Court. They are not doing their job. I mean, he had a full year left in his presidency, and it didn't matter if he only had a week left. He's still the President of the United States. It's his job to appoint, and it's the Senate's job to do nothing but to advise and consent to the appointment. That's all. And for McConnell and those assholes to refuse to even look, you've got to vote Democrat this time, because whoever gets in that Oval Office is going to be appointing the next Supreme Court. And probably Ruth Bader Ginsburg's replacement, because she's getting very old, and more than likely another liberal, maybe Breyer, I don't know, but whoever gets the Oval Office this next time can appoint up to 3 Supreme Court justices. And if it's Donald Trump, you better get the hell out of this country. Because it's all over. It is all over. If you want to grow up in a free country, you better go to Holland, France, you better just get out of here. I have a house in southern France right now, and I bought that house because of reading Rousseau. I made my mind up 30, 40 years ago that by the time this point in my life, I was going to have someplace else to go. Because to think that somehow the United States is going to be different from all these other countries seemed very naive to me. And Dwayne and I had very long discussions about this. And I have up here Goethe, who is not a philosopher. He's a writer. Has anybody here read Goethe's Faust? You know the story of Faust. Faust sold his soul to Mephistopheles, the devil. And there are many, 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 many different versions of that. You know, and some of them it's for wealth and some it's for money. In Goethe's version of Faust, Faust wanted one thing and one thing only. He wanted to experience everything life had to offer. Good, bad, it didn't matter. And his deal with Mephistopheles is if I ever get to a point where I'm saying I'm content, here's where I want to stay, that's the moment you can have my soul. That was Duane Allman. It's the reason that he died at age 22. He lived life right on the edge. You know, when I first met him, he was popping black beauties we call it, but it's methadone. And just, you know, yeah, and until one day he realized it was method with his guitar playing, he put that crap away and never touched it again. He would experiment with everything until he realized it was affecting his playing, and then he never did it again. One of the last things that he got into was smack. And he never would stick a needle in his arm, and he went batshit if he ever thought that anybody in the band, he knew everybody was playing around with it, but he went batshit, especially on Greg, because you know he caught him many times with a needle in his arm, and you know he just lost it. But several months before Dwayne died, we played a gig in San Francisco, and Dwayne followed me back to my room, and I kept looking back, going, oh, shit. You know, something bad's coming, because he didn't usually do that. And so we walked into my room, he closed the door and he said, Butch, what the hell is going on? And I turned around and looked at him and I said, what are you talking about? He said, every time I get up there to play, you guys giving me nothing. Dickie plays, you're blowing him through the roof. And this is one of the few times in my life I, without hesitation, looked him right back in the eye and said, Dwayne, you are so fucked up. You ain't giving us nothing. I feed off of you. And if you're not throwing me anything, I can't throw you anything back. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, that's why he followed me up there. He knew it. But he knew I was the only one that would tell him that. But I was the only one that wasn't doing it. And he just looked at me for a minute, turned around and walked out the door, went straight back to Macon, grabbed 3 or 4 of the guys that were really getting into the stuff too heavy, headed straight to Buffalo, New York, cleaned up and never touched it again for the rest of his life. I mean, he had that backbone, that character, and there was nothing more important than music. So that covers all of those guys. Move on. Now, I'm going to step back and let you watch something. We got to switch computers so we can get sound. And you guys have no idea what the last hour has been. Some of you guys know, but an hour ago, I decided I was going to do this. Now, if you think what I just got through with sounds like a college course, you should have heard what I was thinking about doing. About 4 days ago, I was trying to sing Desolation Row on the RV that the freight train's riding around in. And for about the 30th time in my life, I couldn't remember all the verses. So, what? I'll ask for it later. But anyway, Perry Oakley had the room next to me, and he spent 3 hours listening to me walking around the room, going, you know, they're selling passports to the hanging. They're painting the passports brown. The beauty parlor is filled with sailors. The circus is in town. Y'all know the song, right? I don't think I know. This is the greatest piece of poetry and literature it's ever been put to music in modern times. And after I finally remembered all the words, something that I have been searching for ever since I first heard the first time, and that wasn't grammatically correct, but screw it. Since I heard, you don't need ever, since I heard Desolation Row the first time, I knew there was something more than just these words. And I've been digging and digging. And the other night, click, the key went off. And I will say this, and then I'll leave this alone, but this was going to be my whole talk today, is taking apart Desolation Row and talking about what it means. I will say this, if you're listening and you're looking for the key, try this one. Desolation Row sounds like a bad place, right? It sounds desolation, I mean, it sounds desolate, whatever. It's desolate because there's not many people there. Desolation Row is that place that a very few people go that understand reality and not this propaganda bullshit that we're being fed by television and everything else. And if ever Desolation Row is really valid, it's right now when we got Donald Trump running for president and people were actually buying that shit. So anyway, you know, you go in, Cinderella, she's so easy. It takes one to know one. She smiles and sticks her hand in her back pocket. I love this line, Betty Davis style. And in comes Romeo, he's moaning. So Cinderella she's in Desolation Row. She is in reality. She ain't waiting for Prince Charming anymore. She grabs Romeo and she takes off and she sweeps up Desolation Row. Does this make sense? Well, I have a very long dissertation on that we may do sometime, but, you know. Now we're going to head into the Allman Brothers band, how it formed, and where it went, and I will try to end at Dwayne's funeral. There are a couple of things that happen after that we may get to. Most likely I've already wasted half of my time. I haven't wasted anything. I've been saying things that are important, but we may go over time, but if you were here the last time, you know that. So right now, I'm just going to play the montage that they played when we were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and this says a lot, so enjoy. Turn it up.
Dwayne was a very unique individual, very powerful person.
He had such a passion for living and such a passion for music. And he was the instigator. Like if something wasn't going on and happening, he'd make it happen.
When it's time for leaving, I hope you understand that I was born to happy man. Oh, baby, I just don't know. Dickie Betts, Butch Trucks, Dwayne Allman, and I'm Dwayne Allman. Thank you.
Hey, y'all give me a minute to calm down. I'm crying. It's just so overwhelming to think that I was a part of all that. You know? Whew.
Thank you.
That's profound. And you know, I'm at 69 and Jesus, it ain't stopped yet, you know, and I can't,
Forever.
I just have to thank Dwayne for that, because, you know, there's one thing that Greg said in that triggered a story that's worth telling before I get to Dwayne showing up at my door with J-Mo. You know, he said Dwayne was an instigator, things weren't happening, he made them happen. I was with Dwayne at his house in Daytona in about 1967, a couple of years before he took off. It was just before he took off to go to Muscle Shoals. And he gets up, we fix some coffee, have some breakfast, and then he goes out in the garage and comes out with his briefcase. He said, Butch, come on. So we get out and get this old 58 Dodge, and we drive around Daytona Beach finding these empty lots, go around turning over logs, and started collecting snakes and putting them in the briefcase. A couple of logs we turned over, and a rattlesnake was there. We turned that one back over, but we collected a bunch of green snakes and garter snakes and black snakes, you know, harmless snakes. But by the time Dwayne was satisfied, we had like 40 or 50 snakes in this briefcase. Then he closed it and locked it, and we drove across the tracks, and the sun was going down. He said, Butch, jump out. So I jumped out, and I put the briefcase on the corner, and we went around the corner and sat there and waited and talked. And sure enough, after a little while, here comes these four guys, and they come back again, slow down, and they're all looking. And then they come back again. One of them jumps out, grabs the briefcase, they take off, and we're dead on their butt. You know? And they go about 2 blocks. Four guys running every direction. I would give everything I have to have been in that car when those snakes came out of that briefcase. But then we went back over to Dwayne's house, got his guitar, went back over to a place called George's Place, and we were the only 2 white guys in there. And if I hadn't been with Dwayne, they'd have cut me up the minute I walked through the door. I mean, you know, this is 1967. I mean, Jim Crow was still very much alive in the South. And although, thanks to Mr. LBJ, the Civil Rights Act had been passed, and segregation was finally a thing of the past, it was a long way away from getting any kind of balance in the South. And not just the South. I mean, the worst race, people talk about the South, but the worst race riots in the country happened in South Boston. There's no doubt. And Watts, you know. Although, I will admit that it was more a day-to-day matter of life in places like Mississippi and Alabama, which we will get to in a minute. But anyway, This is a picture that comes immediately after Dwayne knocks at the door with J-Mo. And, I mean, of course, Dwayne had already left, gone to Muscle Shoals. He'd done all the things he had done. One little story I'll throw in here is y'all know about Wilson Pickett and Hey Jude. You've heard that. It's what Eric Clapton, when talking to Tom Dowd, when Tom mentioned Duane Allman's name, he said, "Oh, you mean Sky Dog? The guy that played on Wilson Pickett?" He said, "That is the greatest rock and roll guitar solo I've ever heard in my life." And to this day, he still says that. But Dwayne was there at Muscle Shoals with Wilson Pickett. They're trying to finish this album. They need a couple of songs. And Hey Jude was #1 on the charts. You just don't cover a #1 song. You wait till it goes away, give it time, and then cover it. But Dwayne threw it out to Wilson. You know what Wilson said? "I ain't doing no song about no Jew." That was Wilson Pickett, that wasn't Dwayne. Dwayne was never racist, never anti-Semitic, ever, you know. I wouldn't say the thing about Wilson Pickett, but anyway. So Dwayne said, "No, Hey Jude by the Beatles." So as Hey Jude by the Beatles was coming down the charts, Wilson Pickett was coming back up. And not long after the Beatles disappeared, Wilson Pickett replaced it as #1. Biggest hit he ever had. And that's from Dwayne. But back to the story. Dwayne knocks at my door, and standing behind him is J-Mo. And J-Mo at the time had a waist about this big around, arms about this big. I mean, he was a muscle-bound, oh man. And he had this fro out to here, was wearing a tank top with these damn bear claw necklace on. And I'm this middle-class white guy, been raised a Southern Baptist. Although I'm very, very, very thankful to my parents that in my whole life, I never heard them argue once, and I never heard one single racist remark come out of either of their mouths my whole life. And my dad being from a little family farm north of Birmingham, Alabama, this is quite remarkable. You know, I never, ever heard anything racist. So even though I grew up in a very segregated life, I had very little contact with anybody other than white. I didn't have that in my head. So, but I also didn't have any idea how to interact with somebody that wasn't like me. So Dwayne's standing there, J-Mo's behind him, and this, I'll never forget, and this is another good insight into Duane Allman. He looks at me and says, "Butch, this is J-Mo, my new drummer. J-Mo, this is Butch, my old drummer." Because I had played with him and Greg in the band a little earlier. Some of y'all may know that story, but that's not pertinent here. So Dwayne, in his typical style, comes in, plops J-Mo down, and so far, J-Mo ain't said shit. He just walking around with his head down, and we used to call him J-Mo King Nod and Frown, which became Frown, because J-Mo was a lover of Robitussin AC. And if you don't know what that is, that's cough syrup with codeine. And back then, you could buy it over the counter. So you just go, get a bottle of Robitussin AC, chuck the whole thing, and then J-Mo would sit around trying to stay awake and you know, enjoy the high, which sometimes he was able to do and sometimes he wasn't, but it made him nod and frown. So he was King Nod and Frown, which became Frown. So I'm sitting there, Dwayne sticks around about 10 minutes and says, "Oh, I gotta go," and he just splits, and there's J-Mo. And there's me and my white ass going, "Oh my God, a militant N-word, he's gonna kill me." And no other way to react. And God bless him, he's still my best friend in the world. I love him dearly, and he, more than anybody else, taught me what it meant to be a human being. And it ain't what's on the outside, it's what's on the inside. And if any of y'all have been lucky enough to meet J-Mo or have any time around him, you know what an absolute gentle soul he is, and wise. When J-Mo talks, he's talking from the planet J-Mo, we call it. And it's best that you just shut up and pay attention, because something wise is coming out. You know? So anyway, Dwayne went across town, grabbed Barry Oakley, and his first thing was there was going to be a Duane Allman band. Because Dwayne showed up, he already had signed management and recording contract with Phil Walden, Otis Redding's old manager in Macon, Georgia. So, you know, that was already done. Their first attempt was kind of a power trio. It was going to be the Duane Allman trio, which was Dwayne, Barry, and J-Mo. And they went to Muscle Shoals, laid down about 3 tracks. Some of y'all might have heard It Happened to Barry Man. Anybody? No? Well, that was Dwayne singing, and once he listened to that, he said, well, this ain't gonna work, you know, because he couldn't sing. And Dwayne was very confident, but he was also very confident in what he could do. You know, he was very confident in what he could do. And ergo, we're here talking about him 43 years later. And I still cry about him. And I still have dreams about him. I still have dreams that I'll run into him somewhere. There's a piece of me that will never turn loose of that guy. He's still in there and always will be. But anyway, Dwayne came back from that round of Muscle Shoals, and this is a picture of us on a Sunday afternoon jam at a place called the Forest Hills Inn, and everybody in Jacksonville, when Dwayne showed up, he was already a star to all the musicians in Jacksonville. So everybody, he let the word out that he was putting together a band. So everybody wanted to be in that band. J-Mo and Oakley were already in there. And Barry was the first one that started whispering in Dwayne's ear, hey, I'm playing with this guitar player, and you really ought to listen to him. And Dwayne had already decided after playing with J-Mo enough that J-Mo didn't play strong enough. He played well enough, but he didn't play powerful enough to drive the kind of band's vision that he had in his head, where he was going. So Dwayne said, I'm going to have 2 drummers. And he said, if James Brown can have 2 drummers, I can have 2 drummers. So, but, and this leads to another story. You may well want to move on. Okay, this will come later. Going back to the other one, I'll finish the formation of the Allman Brothers. Dwayne started jamming with Dickie. There were, like I said, there were a lot of other guitar players around, but more and more and more, Dwayne and Dickie were the pair. And it was becoming more and more obvious that that's where we were headed. And everybody's going, God, what's this? 2 lead guitar players? You know? And then, you know, the word got out that he wanted a second drummer. And there were 3 or 4 other damn good drummers around Jacksonville at the time. I mean, there was a big hippie scene going on in Jacksonville. We were trying to recreate Haight-Ashbury in 1969. You know, Haight-Ashbury had come and gone 3 years earlier, but us in the South were a little slower. We moved a little slower. So anyway, J-Mo kept telling Dwayne, Butch is your guy. Butch is your guy. But Dwayne had played with me before. And at that time, I wasn't the most confident guy around. And when things weren't going well with whatever we were playing, I had a real bad propensity to back off, you know. And Dwayne knew this. And he knew I could play, but I knew Dwayne well enough, and I knew him well enough to know that he wasn't going to let me on stage with him with that flaw. And so, a couple of weeks after this picture was taken, we're out in the woods outside of this top 40, right outside of this top 40 radio station called WAPE, the brigade that played, you know. Anybody know that? You know that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you remember Dino Dino something or another. Yeah, he was the big DJ there. He thought he was hot shit too. But anyway, we started playing this shuffle, and I started backing off. And Dwayne whipped around and stared me down and played this stuff like, come on, son, bitch, let's go. And my first reaction is, and then he did it again. And then he did it again. And I looked around and there's hundreds of people watching him show me up. And I started to get pissed. And so and we literally got into a musical fist fight, back and forth. He's going, like I'm hitting him upside the head. And then all of a sudden he steps back, smiles, and goes, there you go. And it's like he reached inside of me and flipped a switch. And this light went off. Butch, there's always going to be a better drummer out there, but you can play. And from that day to this, I ain't backed up. You jammed with me, you know. I tend to, if anything, I play too much or too loud or whatever. I don't back up. And if that hadn't happened, I would have been a math teacher, as I said earlier. That's where I was headed. But that epiphany right there got me into the Allman Brothers band and led on to where we're going. Now, I'd like to get to Piedmont Park first. There we are. We went to Macon. We put everything together in Jacksonville. And the first thing that happened is Dwayne called Greg. And I won't go through all the crowd that Greg put us through that caused that first band to fall apart, but it was Greg. Greg sold Melissa and a couple of other songs to the guy that was producing us for $350 so he could get airfare back to LA. It turned out the whole time we were trying to put a band together and do all this recording, Dwayne's on the horn to his old manager in LA putting together a solo career. And so he flew off to LA on the pretext that he was going out there to get us some gigs. And I climbed into the Ford Econoline that we spent the next 2 years living in, went back to Daytona with Dwayne, and I think this was about the time we did the Snakes thing. It was cool. But Greg called Dwayne and told him what had been going on. And I know for a fact, if Dwayne could have crawled through that telephone, Dwayne would have been a dead man. I mean, Greg would have been a dead man that moment. I've never seen him so mad in my life. He went nuclear. And that's when he came to me and he said, Butch, you know, this Greg has split. This band ain't gonna work. I really want to go to Muscle Shoals. And he went up and camped out of Muscle Shoals, and y'all all know where that went. So, anyway, wait, man, I ain't even got here yet. So Greg shows up in Jacksonville, and just to give an insight of how things worked with the band right from the beginning, is Greg shows up with one song, Whipping Post, that he wrote as a slow ballad. Process that. Now we knew it was a great song, but not like that. So, Barry, you here? I'm gonna wring his stinking little neck. He needs to hear all this. So one of the first things that happened was Barry Oakley came up with and J-Mo happened to be sitting behind his drum, so he's trying to play it with him, and it ain't working. And believe it or not, I was the only member of the Allman Brothers, the original Allman Brothers, that knew how to read music. You know, I studied classical music and actually conducted Dvorak's Symphony No. 9 once. I could read a whole score. And I knew as soon as they started playing what they were doing. You've heard the story though, but anyway, I just wanted, well, I'm talking about your daddy, so I just thought you might want to be here. So, anyway, they tried it and it fell apart, and I knew as soon as they played it, they were in 11. And so they fell apart one time, and I looked at J-Mo, and I said, J-Mo, 3 3s and a 2. And so they go, and B.O. jumps up and goes, "Goddamn, it's jazz!" And the whole song took out from there. And Greg goes back to where he was staying and starts packing up his shit. And Dwayne walks in and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Man, I'm going back to L.A. I ain't going to have you guys ripping my music apart like that." And Dwayne grabbed him, threw him against the wall and said, "Listen, you were this close to blowing your damn brains out before you showed up. And we are going. So you sit down and shut the fuck up." And he did. And the rest, as they say. So anyway, we packed everything up from Jackson. This is all in Jacksonville, Florida, in my living room, where he showed up with Dreams, with Black-Hearted Woman, Every Hungry Woman, Aim I Cross the Bear. I mean, he'd been out in L.A. just in a funk, and which is the best place for a songwriter to be, you know. And I mean, you know, so we took those songs, expounded on them, turned them into what you have grown up listening to or gotten old listening to, like me playing, and we packed everything up, and all we had was this Ford Econoline, which we spent 2 years riding around in with 2 in the front. We had 2 mattresses in the back, and we lay one this way, one this way, one this way, one this way, and we bought an old Hertz truck, painted it black, called it Black-Hearted Woman, stuck our 2 roadies, Kim Payne and Mike Callahan, in that truck and put the equipment inside it, oddly enough, instead of the other way around, which, never mind. I thought it was funny. So we packed up and went to Macon, Georgia, because that's where that's where Phil Walden was. That was going to be our base. And we moved into Twiggs Linden's old place. Twiggs Linden was actually the first member of the Allman Brothers. He was working for Phil Walden, and Twiggs Linden was absolutely convinced that a white guy cannot play guitar. Now, this is based on the fact that Twiggs Linden started as a bank teller, and early in his career as a bank teller, this outrageous black dude by the name of Little Richard walked up and talked him into being his road manager. So he went straight from Macon, Georgia, bank teller, to being 7 years Little Richard's road manager, and you can imagine how weird and perverted that got. I used to room with Twiggs, and the phone would ring at 3 o'clock in the morning, and Twiggs said, "Hey, Richard, no, man, no, yeah, that's cool, but no, let's go on and on and on and on." And I'm sorry if this offends anybody, but he'd hang it up. I said, "Twiggs, what was that all about?" He says, "Little Richard." I said, "I figured that out, but what was that all about?" He said, he just called me and said, "Twiggs, I'm jacking. You jacking?" "Come on, Twiggs. Well, at least talk to me. At least talk to me while I'm jacking." That was Little Richard. And believe me, it gets a whole lot worse than that, but I won't go there. But Twiggs, Phil Walden had just gotten an advance release of Hey Jude, and he called Twiggs in his office and played it for him. And he said, "Listen to this guitar at the end." And Twiggs listened, and Phil said, "Is that any good?" He said, "Is that any good? God damn." He said, "He's white." He said, "Bullshit." He said, "No, he is." He said, "Bullshit." Because one of the members of that band that Little Richard had at the time happened to be named Jimi Hendrix, who stayed in the band just long enough until he started discovering himself. And you do not upstage Little Richard and stay in his band. And in spite of himself, and in spite of trying to hold himself in, Jimmy just couldn't hold it back. And he started showing up Little Richard, so he got his ass fired. went to London, and then, then we started the process of trying to be in the same place at the same time so we could jam with him. The only time that ever happened was at Byron at the second Atlanta Pop Festival, which we'll get to in a minute. But Jimmy was so messed up, about all he could play was the Star Spangled Banner in some strange key, and we never did get to jam with him because, nobody, at that time, we were all immortal. We weren't going to die. Nobody dies. Not then, But Jimmy was the first one, I think. I'm not sure. I think he beat Janis, didn't he? And Jim Morrison. I don't know. They all went at about the same time. But we finally had enough of practicing. We spent months in this old warehouse in Macon that Phil Allman owned, working up Elizabeth Reed, working up all these other tunes that I just ran down. And we were just busting to play for somebody. So we finally one day, we just loaded up Black-Hearted Woman, all climbed into the van, went to Piedmont Park, found a flat space, that's it, that had some plugs nearby, set up, plugged up, didn't ask anybody, and started jamming. And that was the very first time the Allman Brothers band ever played in front of people. Now I need this, and I may need your light again. Anybody here of the Great Speckled Bird?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Shoot. Okay, I do need your light. Damn it. Okay, I got it. Now, this is the article that came out in the Great Speckled Bird, which was the Atlanta underground newspaper in 1969. And this was in response to this jam. We set up and started jamming, and as you can see, people started gathering. Before it was over, there was a couple thousand people standing around. We went back the next week, and there was about 5,000 people. We went back the next week, and then somebody had set up a flatbed with a generator out in the middle of a field, and there's pretty damn near 10,000 people there, and about 4 or 5 other bands, including Bruce Hampton and the Grease Band. And it just exploded into this thing that just, God, what a way to get a band started. Because back then, the cops were really being careful about trying not to antagonize the hippies and vice versa. So when we finished playing, everybody cleaned up the park. We left it cleaner than when we got there. There was never any fights. There was never any problems. If anybody even looked at each other angrily, 10 people would put them apart. It ain't going to happen. This is all about love and music. Maybe not in that order, but maybe so. But this is what the Great Speckled Bird had to say about that. From the Great Speckled Bird, April 16, 1969. The Allman Brothers Band from Macon, Georgia are a fantastically together group of young rock and roll musicians whose music draws as heavily from the blues as the experience of young white tribesmen who can, without exploiting its source, a few steps farther and you get a merely talented farce like Johnny Winter. No comment. Since our generation is tribal, and at that time it was, the hippies, you have to say, we were a tribe, a nationwide tribe that was fighting the war in Vietnam and the corruption in Washington and everything else that, oh boy, we need another round of that really bad. We really do. If it doesn't happen, you better find a place somewhere else. And I'll say that more than once. I've already said it, haven't I? Yeah, well, you're going to hear it. So anyway, totally unique. Totally unlike our parents and grandparents and their parents, it is only natural that we would turn to the black man, whose tribal roots go so much deeper and do not have thousands of years of bullshit, quote, civilization, end quote, to cut them off from those roots. For forms with which to relate to the New World, the history of the black man in America is the history of tribal man in an alienated, fragmented, capitalistic, literate, industrial, quote, end quote, Oriental culture. Young people are simply showing good sense when they attempt to co-opt black culture, just as the dying order desperately attempts to put its stamp on the culture of its youth. But creating and redefining our own culture in terms of the new space age tribalism is a crucial struggle and follows as naturally from where we are at now, bad grammar, as Grace Slick follows Patty Page. The blues, the entire complex of music which has come out of the experience of the black man in America belongs to forms and patterns and relationships of experience of which we now have only the tiniest fraction of an inkling. Even that is a hell of a lot. The black man's blues, whether manifested in Lightning Hopkins or Smokey Robins and the Miracles, flows out of him, while our blues is wrenched out bloody like a fragmentedly pulled tooth, like a prematurely pulled tooth. Contrast the shouting subtleties and the rock-like soul of a Mahalia Jackson with the strained histrionics of a Janis Joplin, who somewhere down under her package probably does have some soul of her own. Art is not a product, it is a process. The blues, whether country or urban, artistic or electric, raw or commercial, cannot be copied from records or concerts or books or own black culture. The musical language of the black man cannot be co-opted simply because it happens to be powerful and sings of things we are just now recognizing as more valid than what we have been hung up on for centuries. Our music must develop its own power, its own forms, its own patterns of relationship with our tribal roots and our space-age technology in an unbroken line all the way down into our pre-literate origins and out into the unknown galaxies. The Allman Brothers know all this and a lot more. Anyway, that's some guy who likes to hear himself talk like I do. And luckily, he at least admitted that we knew something. But that was kind of the launching point, and we went on from there. Next. Now, next. I don't know where that was from. That's another picture from Piedmont Park. Now, I'm pretty sure this is from Byron, the second Atlanta Pop Festival. We were just forming when the first Atlanta Pop Festival happened at the Speedway. So in this one happening, we weren't fully known yet, but we just went in and took over with a vengeance. I mean, they had pretty much everybody there, but when everybody left, they weren't talking about nobody but that band. I mean, we played every day. We played as long as they let us play. And if we weren't playing there was a free stage on the other side of the main road, and we would go over there and play. But we pretty much played non-stop. And the one thing that I'll never forget is it got hot. It got through the roof hot. And we probably won't have time, but we have a whole bunch of Georgia State Trooper films of Byron, which includes quite a few naked bodies swimming in the river near there trying to cool off. And we got into a jam. I think we were playing Mountain Jam or something like that. And the rain was moving in, so they just threw a tarp over the top of the stage. And you can imagine what happened. That tarp filled up with hundreds of gallons of rainwater and finally went boom and fell on everything. And guess what we did? we just kept right on playing because we had two drummers. So me and J-Mo, every time I hit my damn tom-tom, I got splashed with rain, but I just kept going. We kept going, everybody picked up stuff, and we just kept on going, which was something that we did quite often. I mean, there were several times that, you know, the promoters were playing a gig, and our time had run out, and they made the fatal mistake of turning off the power, which didn't mean shit other than me and J-Mo kicked into a drum thing. Everybody pick up on something, and there was one time, this went on like 45 minutes, and we're having a battle of the wills with the cops. And they go up to Twiggs, they say, get them off that stage, and Twiggs says, you get them off the stage. And they weren't about to walk on that stage, so we just kept going, and they finally go to Twiggs and say, how do we get them off? They said, well, if you turn the power back on, they were only about 5 minutes away from finishing. So they turned the power back on, and we played for 2 more hours. And they weren't about to turn it off again. That happened many times. It was one good thing about having 2 drummers. And that happened at Byron, and not only was it so much fun and so special, but it was such a relief for all of those just worn out kids that had been in that burning sun all day long. And they were just dancing in the mud and just having the time of their life. And there's nothing but drums going on and people beating on boom-outs and everything else. And if I've ever seen something tribal, that was it. And this is after we got the flatbed at Piedmont Park. So this had been the third or fourth Piedmont Park gig. Okay, we're moving on to 1970. We don't have time for this, yeah. Back up. Do you know the picture you're looking for?
Back up.
No, go forward. And we'll wind up, no, wait a minute, stay there for a second. That's the picture we're looking for, but go stay there for a second. This is the house that we're leaning up against the columns on the first album. We used to come back every night after practicing all day long, and somebody had a big bag of what they called psilocybin. What was actually in those pills, God only knows, but I'm sure he has doubts. But we would wait till after practice, and then come back, drop a few of those things. And the only furniture, this hippie crash pad is what we called it. This was Twiggs' place. It was just a little 2-bedroom apartment in Macon, and we threw mattresses all over the place, and we had one piece of furniture, and that was a Coke machine full of beer, which we tried to keep filled by paying for the beer, but we always never had any money, so we talked Twiggs into open it up, and we'd just take all the beer and drink it, and then try to find some money to refill it, you know. But this was next door, and you can imagine that place had been deserted forever and ever. And when you get inside that place, which we did all the time, in that frame of mind, man, I was talking to people from 500 years ago that were floating around in that room. Yeah, there was ghosts in that room. I had many long conversations with quite a few of them. I think one of them was a direct ancestor of mine. I'm not sure. He said he was. I'm not sure if he was telling the truth. But they went and leveled the crash pad, and now I just visited that. It had been converted into a real upscale restaurant, and now it is a college of stringed instruments. They're teaching kids violin and cello and that kind of thing, so that's cool. I went in there. I knocked on the door last time I was there a couple months ago. I knocked on the door, they recognized me, they came running to the door. I said, come on in, come on in, come on in. So I walked around and we had a long talk. There was a teacher there that was teaching a girl. They came out, they knew who I was. It was really special. It really was nice. So move on. Now, this is the beginning of nothing but what I call war stories. This was the Winnebago that had several names. We called it Winnie, the windbag. This is after we finally made 2 cross-country trips in that Ford Econoline. The last one we made, we had to go from San Diego to New York. We made it on a bag of Mexican Reds and 2 quarts of Robitussin AC. If you were unlucky enough to wake up, you grab a handful of Reds, throw them down, chug down all the AC you can handle, and try to go back to sleep. And trust me, by the time we hit Chicago, there was some attitudes. Oakley's daddy came out of this damn truck stop. He had just had a little baby, and he had a life-size stuffed Saint Bernard. And there was about 7 of us standing there like this saying, you ain't getting in here with that damn thing. Because there wasn't enough space. But about the time we hit Chicago and the ice was about that thick, everybody wanted that Saint Bernard. Because it was cold. It was really cold. There's another story I could say here. It's one of the few times that me and Greg ever actually had fun together. I will tell it. Hell, it was fun. We finally got snowed in south of Chicago, and if y'all know that area, that's all farmland. And we found this cheap hotel and got 1 room, and we stayed there and took what little money we had and bought all the Ripple we could find. I used to call it Ripple wine, but now I just call it Ripple. And so after Greg and I got, pretty well oiled, we decided, we're a couple of Southerners. Snow up this deep is just something we hadn't seen before. So we decided to go out and check it out. And right behind the hotel is this paddock with this old nag in it, all covered in ice and snow and really looking pitiful. So he came up to us and we're petting it, and one of us gave him a bunch of Ripple, and he actually drank it. And then turned around and started kicking at us. And so we moved on, got way out in some open field, and one of us, I don't know which genius it was, came up with the idea that we strip down naked and run around in the snow. So we did. And we didn't think about what happens to you when you do that. You lose your sense of feel. We couldn't get our clothes back on. It was just, so we're out there buck naked in this knee-deep snow, that close to death and too stupid to know it, Somehow we got our clothes back on and got back, so move on. No! This is the windbag. And this was the source of many, 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 many wonderful experiences. One of my favorites, and you'll find out why, we used to play poker a lot. We had a dining table like all campers do, and we're sitting around playing 5-card draw. And all of a sudden, Red Dog, who was our driver, slams on the brakes. We go, what? What the fuck? And Red Dog said, wait a minute. And the door opens, and in walks 2 gorgeous girls. We say, hey, what y'all doing? He said, well, we're going to this festival. We want to see the Allman Brothers. He said, well, don't look no further. Here we is. And they went, what? What? So they sat down, and, they're sitting there, and we're looking, and they're looking, and we're looking, and they're looking. And finally somebody says, how about we play the next hand for her? And they were deathly silence, It's up to her, And so finally she looked at us and smiled and said, okay. And we got real serious. And so the cards are dealt. We take our cards. Dwayne's sitting there, and Dwayne was the loudest poker player in the world because he had no poker face. He lit up like a damn neon light bulb, and he dropped full boat queens over. And I let him get all the way up before I said, Dwayne, full boat kings. And he went, And I got up and grabbed my winnings and went to the shower, and we all lathered up. And you really need to be doing 80 miles an hour covered in soap with a gorgeous girl sometime to know what I'm talking about. So we finally rinsed off, moved to the back bunk, and I'm going as strong as I possibly can, and she taps me on the shoulder, and I stop. I said, "What?" She pointed up, and I look up, and J-Mo's watching us. And I looked at her, I said, "Does that bother you?" She said, "No." I said, "Okay." Next picture, or I think, oh no. This is Dwayne sitting there while I'm collecting my winnings. Now go back to the other one. No, down. This is 2 days later. And believe me, we didn't do any fishing in those 2 days. And you can tell I'm pretty well content. And you can tell Dwayne ain't. He didn't like losing. Okay, move on. All right, this is a very famous picture of by Jim Marshall of Dwayne. And that shirt you'll see later. Someone almost died because of that shirt. It was made of raw silk, and he gave it to me. And my goddamn house cleaner put it in the washing machine. So rather than kill her, I fired her. But, you know, you can imagine what water does to raw silk. It just destroyed it. Okay, move on. Now, this is the Allman Brothers visits. You can tell where we are. That's the Grand Canyon, obviously. And leave it there. There are a few more pictures we're coming to, I think, but this is really the one. What you can't tell here is there's about 30 feet of loose gravel that we had to slide down to get out there onto that little rock. And Twiggs Linden, you can see where the picture is. If you notice, there's nothing underneath him. He's out in a dead tree hanging out over the Grand Canyon a half a mile straight down, taking these pictures. And us flatlanders from Florida are too dumbass to understand that you can't slide up 30 feet of loose gravel. So we had to edge across that cliff right there, and we found a little chimney where we could kind of, because where Twiggs is, where that camera is actually, you can sort of see up there. We had to get that far back up before we could get out of there. And I got almost to the top, grabbed, luckily, had both hands like this, went to push with my foot, and the rock went, oh, and I'm hanging like this. And up to that point in my life, I had no fear of heights. Right now, I can't get on a little step ladder. It put the fear of the Lord, or whatever, it put fear of heights into me. But anyway, move on. Oh, you've heard of the warehouse? Anybody heard of the warehouse? That's the warehouse. This was an old, all wooden, it's right on the docks in New Orleans. It's where they used to store cotton back in the cotton picket days, and that wood was so old and had aged so much. That was the best sounding room we ever played in. We had some of the greatest jams in life in that room. And we got to the point to where when we could, you know, we'd already played Watkins Glen for 600,000 people. We had played Madison Square Garden, sold out 4 nights in a row, sold out 4 nights in a row in 3 hours. I mean, it was a brand new record. Oh God. Another story popped in. I can't keep doing this, so keep going. Now, this is a story I have to tell, whole story. This is the first of several mug shots, but we were leaving New Orleans, headed toward Tuscaloosa, Alabama to play at the University of Alabama. And the windbag was broken down, so we had 2 rental cars and Black-Hearted Woman. And Red Dog was in the lead car with a very strict command: stay on the interstate, which he didn't do. And when I woke up, we're way back in the backwoods of L.A., Lower Alabama. We got one smart guy back here. And more specifically, a place called Grove Hill, Alabama. And some idiot, I don't know who it was, got hungry. So we pulled into some diner to have breakfast. And about half the guys, and we had, like I said, we had 2 rental cars. One of them parked right next to Black-Hearted Woman, and another one way down the way with a bunch of other cars in between. So a bunch of us went into that diner to have breakfast, including J-Mo. And I happened to be sitting at the end of the table, and this fat LA woman, who's the waitress, comes walking toward us, caught sight of J-Mo, went like this, turned around and went to the other end of the diner and leaned over, and I noticed she talking to the sheriff. And he's there with his 3 deputies. And I could read her lips. She said, I ain't serving that nigger. And I looked at everybody, I said, if you've got anything on you, go to the bathroom right now and flush it. Because shit is about to hit the fan. She started back to us, looked again, and I mean, the sheriff first just waved her off. Said, get out of here, get out of here. She went back again, same thing. The 3rd time, the sheriff finally said, okay, and he got up, and he and his deputies went out. And the first thing they were greeted with was Dickie Betts, who had gotten rip-roaring on acid the night before, got tired of seeing all this shit, and started eating downers. And about the time we hit that downers, the acid went away, and the downers took over, and he's out there puking his brains out. So they grabbed him. They reached over Red Dog, picked up a coat laying next to him, and found about this much reefer on him. And they came in and told us that they're taking everybody out there in the truck and the car to jail. We can do what we want. And they didn't know about the 2nd car. So we figured we're screwed. Or they figured we're screwed, because we couldn't go anywhere. So they'd leave us there for the local rednecks to take care of, you know. So the minute they left, we jumped in the other car. We're headed out of town. Greg's got his suitcase and stuff's flying out of both sides of the car, all over the place. And before we get out of town, you know, the car pulls up behind us. Then the guy says, follow us. That's all he said. So we go back to the local Grove Hill jail, which had 3 cells. And we took up all 3 of them. But J-Mo wasn't there. You know, we found out later what happened to him. But we're going, what the hell? And then, you know, we remember this is a Jim Crow South, you know. They didn't allow black guys in their jail. But they did allow Red Dog. We'll get to that in a minute. And they did allow Dickie, who had finally gotten to the point to where we're in the jailhouse now. We're in the jailhouse now. So we all joined in and we're singing that. And that lasted for a little while. And then began this long trail of little white boys. And the first thing you'd hear is this redneck saying, now boy, I want you to walk down these cells, look in there and see what that long haired hippie shit will get you. And you see some white little kid coming by. And after about the 3rd one, Red Dog says, I've had enough of this. So he strips down completely butt naked and hides in the corner. And Red Dog, skinny as a spider monkey that had a scrotum and hung about a foot. So sure enough, within about a half hour, you hear this, son, I want you to go look. And here comes this kid. And out from the corner comes Red Dog, jumps up on the bars and starts shaking like this. His balls are going back and forth. That kid turned 10 more shades of white, bolted, and we didn't see any more kids after that. And so after a while, then they took us all in for the mug shot. And while we're doing the mug shots, this is the mug shot from that day, and mine will come in a minute. And it may not, I don't know, because Dwayne's attitude is pretty much how we were reacting to this whole thing. We were really having a lot of fun. You know? We're in the jail in LA, but fuck it, it's fun. You know, I'm sorry. I try not to say that word, but I can't help it. And it does, never mind. So, you know, you can see Dwayne, he's cleaning his hands off after being fingerprinted. Now the funny thing is Dickie had come back, but he hadn't quite made it back yet. And we're in there, and they were in there going, God damn it, hit this. I mean, every time they got his hands covered in ink, and he'd go to hit it, he'd go, and miss, and then do it again, clean him up, and go, and miss. And then, not long after that, some deputy walks in, and he said, look what I found on the side of the road. And they all looked at it and said, damn, that's herring. That's herring. We got them now, boy, we got them now. So, not long after that, they took us all from this little 3 lockup to the county lockup. And it was still segregated. This is where we found J-Mo. And lucky for us, since we were with J-Mo, they put us all on the black side. Because I don't think we'd lived long on the white side back in 1970. And, but even at that, I mean, they had 3 sleeping cells, and the first 2 were full. The back one was empty, and that's where they put us. The first thing we did was start in with, yip, 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 boom, 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 good job, sha-da-da-da, sha-da-da-da, all of us singing it in 5-part harmonies and everything else. We finished, and everybody goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then Red Dog makes the bad mistake of trying to get into job talk with one of these guys. So the next morning, they move us into the day cell, and they had this little spark plug of a guy named Louisiana Shorty. You know, I mean, he was serious. And there's damn razor blades all over the place, and they had this old guy named Pops. And Shorty and Pops got into this fake wrestling match that landed right at my feet. And Pops looks up at Shorty and said, this what you gonna do to that red-headed motherfucker? He said, nah, I'm gonna cut him. And I went, oh hell. It's coming. And luckily, within the next hour before anybody got hurt, the jailers showed up and asked if we wanted cigarettes. So we bought cigarettes for everybody. And that did it. That broke the ice. And we were there for 3 days. It took them 3 days to bail us out. And it was really quite a good experience. It really was. I mean, we really got to know these, you know, Southern Alabama black guys. And they had a lot of stories to tell. And we picked up a lot of things from having to spend 3 days with these guys. It was worth it. It was worth every minute of it. They finally bailed us out, and then we hit the road, and we got the word from the University of Alabama that we were persona non grata. Anybody that's going to be arrested is not playing at our university, so we never played at the University of Alabama, and I'm not regretting that 1 minute. But, oh yeah, to finish the story, we brought our New York hotshot lawyers down to negotiate with the DA there, and he said, well, here's the way it is. We have no case. We know that. It was an illegal search. None of us were ever told why we were arrested, and I don't think they ever heard of Miranda. You know, all they said was just go and get that cell. And the only thing they found was some marijuana in a coat laying next to somebody. There's no way they could tie them together. And a little bag of heroin that Greg had thrown out. That they were too stupid enough to take fingerprints off of, you know? So they had no proof to tie anybody to anything. They had no case, and they knew it. But the DA said, I'm up for re-election, You are the biggest thing ever to hit this damn county in forever and ever. And the judge is my father-in-law. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna watch you, and the next time you got a big gig coming up, that's when we're gonna have trial, and you will be there. And then we'll put it off. And then we'll wait for another big gig, and then we'll set trial, and you will be there. Before it's over with, we're gonna cost you a fortune. In the end, we know your walk, but in the meantime, we're gonna cost you a fortune, which at that time we couldn't afford. Later on in our career, we would just said, fuck you, and walked away. Excuse me. So our attorney said, all right, but we're taking no drug charges. We paid $50,000 for disturbing the peace. I figured for 50 grand, we kicked the shit out of the peace. So anyway, move on. You can tell who that is. Okay, another story. I'm standing up, as you can tell. There's a reason for that. The day before, you see that hat band that's on that black hat? I made it with this leather cutting kit that Mike Callahan had. And while I was making it, it slipped and went right across the top of my damn knee and laid it wide open. So I had about 13 stitches in my knee. And actually, if you look close, you can see a lot of suds there. Our idea was to fill the water up with suds so nobody could see anything. And dumb us didn't think that's a flowing creek. This is how I know it's Redding's far. And so they all sit down in the water. I put my hat over myself and hide behind Oakley's head. And then our photographer, Stephen Paley, who almost got himself killed the night before, we picked up a couple of girls from local girls' school, Wesleyan, and had a little group grove going on. Kim Payne was with one of the girls, and Paley was next to him, and Payne felt a hand on him, on his privates, and he figured it was a girl, but he looked down and it was Stephen Paley. He said, Bo, you get that hand off there, you're going to be pulling back a stub. So anyway, we figured out this guy wasn't quite what we thought as normal. I mean, times have changed. But I'm quite sure, even to this day, Kim Payne would not allow Steve Paley to grab his privates. So anyway, with all that going on, after we finished these shots, he talked us into taking standing up, full frontal, everything. And we went crazy, and Walden's up there, and he's going, no, this is just a prosperity. Nobody will ever see these. No way. So, the first time we played at Fillmore East, I'm walking around the Fillmore East going, my God, we made it. We're in the sanctuary of rock and roll. And I walked out into the lobby, and here is a double fold out from Screw Magazine of us standing up. From my perspective, here's the good part. All those guys have been sitting in that freezing cold water. And I'm hanging like a mule. I had a good time in New York City. Move on. Now, here's a story. How many people here believe that Little Martha is about a little girl that's buried in Rose Hill Cemetery? Or you just won't admit it? That's what most avid Allman Brothers fan thinks, because there is this beautiful statue of a little girl named Little Martha that's in Rose Hill Cemetery, not far from where Dwayne and Barry are buried. But that's Little Martha. Her name is Dixie Meadows, and this is Dwayne's girlfriend. And this was the night that Dwayne and I were paying off our bet for the year. And our bet was whoever caught the biggest bass during that year had to treat the other one and his girlfriend or wife to a really fine meal. And this was back in Dwayne's apartment right after my wife, who I had just celebrated 40 years of marriage with, and Dwayne and Dixie, who he called Little Martha because she worked in some hairdressing, and she dressed in this outfit, and Dwayne told her, "You look like Martha Washington." So he started calling her Little Martha. So that is Little Martha. It's not that little statue in the cemetery. Move on. Okay, you all know that without Dwayne, well, Dwayne played on Derek and the Dominoes, Layla, and Assorted Love Songs. What you may not know is if he hadn't, you would have never heard of the damn thing. That lick in the beginning, that ain't Eric Clapton, that's Duane Allman. I mean, Tom Dowd was producing this session, and he knew he had great players, and he knew he had great music. But what he also had was great players that were too damn screwed up to play. I mean, they were doing everything. Smack, coke, booze, you name it. So he's trying to pull this music out of them. And Tom Dowd was the master at doing that. If you listen to Tom Dowd records, they don't ever sound the same. He had a way of deep pulling inside of you and making you play your best. But he just couldn't do it with these guys. And so we happened to be playing in Miami, down on Miami Beach, and he goes to Eric and he said, "Eric, you ever heard of Duane Allman?" And I told him, he said, "Yeah, no, I didn't tell you." He said, "Oh, you mean Sky Dog, that guy that played the Hey Jude?" He said, "That is the greatest rock and roll guitar solo I've ever heard in my life." And he still says that to this day. And Tom said, "Well, they're playing in town tonight." So we walked out on stage out in front of the Jackie Gleason Convention Center in Miami Beach, and sitting on the front row is Tom Dowd, Eric Clapton, and the rest of the Dominoes. And it's the only time I ever saw Dwayne Allman go, I mean, he quit playing. And because his God, Eric Clapton, is there. If you don't follow musical progression, the Allman Brothers is the next step from Cream. Cream opened the door to what we did. Cream took the blues and jammed rather than noodle. And I won't mention any names, but you can figure that one out. O'Teal's playing with them right now. So we decided that we would get improvisational for real, you know? And then J-Mo turned us on to Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Miles Davis, Herbie Hancock, and we went, my God, you can actually jam and use dynamics, chord changes, time signature changes, all of these things that Cream never did. You listen to Cream, and there's a lot of improvisation, but it's very monodynamic. It's in one chord, everything they did. But, like I say, without them, you don't get us. But what we added to the mix was jazz. And that I am very much proud of. Now, the reason this picture is up here, this is one of the 2 gigs that Dwayne actually left us out on the road and went and played with Derek and the Dominoes. And he sat down with me one day and he said, "Eric has offered me a gig with the Dominoes. And I'm really thinking serious about taking it." And I looked at him and I said, "Dwayne, yeah, it's your life. But, man, we really got something going on. And it's yours. Do you really want to walk away from that to be part of somebody else's thing? Really?" And he gave it a long thought, and he finally called Eric and said, "Thanks, but no thanks." And that went on. So, next. That's just a picture of him. Okay. Y'all know this story, don't you? So I have to tell it? Okay, well, I'll just make it quick. This is the only picture that whole day where anybody even has close to a smile on their face. And Dwayne's got an 8-ball in his hand. He had just, the photographer, Jim Marshall, was up in Black-Hearted Woman taking the picture, and Dwayne jumped up. His connection had shown up, and Dwayne jumped up and ran over there to get it, and Jim Marshall started screaming and hollering and screaming and hollering. Dwayne sat down, we all busted out laughing, and he was smart enough to take that picture. So move on. Okay, this is what you call crash landing on Earth after you've made what you thought was a moonshot. You see the date? Well, a week before, we were the last band to play at the Fillmore East. So we thought, you know, Bill Graham came out, and if you've ever heard his introduction from that last night, you know, every time I hear it, it just blows me away. But it ended with him saying, we're going to end with the greatest of them all, the Allman Brothers. So we're up there thinking we're really hot shit. This is where we were a week later. Now, to understand exactly what that means is the steel pier is famous for one thing. Move on. That. So here's the way the process works for the steel pier. Is you go down the steel pier and they have all these arcade games you can play, and then they have a little theater off to the side where the cow sills were playing. And then you come back out, do some more arcades, and then there's a hippie band playing, which was us, and we'd have about 30 or 40 Burnells and, you know, whatever, guys from Kansas who come out wearing their fanny packs and their white tennis shoes, and, you know, and they stop and look at us and go, God damn, you know, and then they move out and watch the monkey troop, and then this was the star of the show, the diving horse. So we spent 2 weeks opening for a diving horse after closing the Fillmore East. And you talk about a crash landing on Earth, that was it. All right, keep going. Okay, back down. That was a typical crowd at Steel Pier. Okay. That's us playing at the Steel Pier. Now, that's Hey Jude, just around the time of Hey Jude. You can tell that's Wilson Pickett and Dwayne. Now we're getting to the serious part of this talk, and I hope I've already gone past my time, but hell with it. The guy on the right, in case you don't know it, is King Curtis. Am I into your time?
No, but
Okay.
but it is lunchtime.
Well, if I am, tough shit. That's King Curtis, and you know who that is on the left. And I mean, they became best friends. And as you probably well know, well, this was when Dwayne was still in Muscle Shoals. So it was a couple of years later that King Curtis was stabbed to death on the steps of his apartment in New York. And Dwayne just fell apart and went to the funeral and played with everybody that knew King Curtis. I mean, the people, a lot of the people that Dwayne worked with when he leave Muscle Shoals, a couple of times he went up to New York and played with King Curtis's band, which is Bernard Purdy and Gerald Jamot and who was the guitar player? There you go. Yeah. And so anyway, Dwayne came back from King's funeral, and I think it was the first time that Dwayne really started facing his own mortality. And I think he understood that he was not destined to lead a long life. So he started talking a lot about what we should do in the event that something happened to him. And the one thing he said, first, don't anybody look at me if I can't look back. Anybody opens my coffin, I will come and hunt your ass. Which his wife did, and it's been a source of contention ever since. But what Dwayne said is just put me in a damn wooden box, throw me in the Ocmulgee River, and stand up there and play for 2 weeks. And basically what he was telling us in a roundabout way is, do not stop what you're doing if I happen to be gone. Don't do it. We're too far down the road. And this music is too important, and we're all replaceable, including me. And when it finally came going, and there we are. And I don't have to tell a story, but yeah, I'll fill in some detail you may not know. Dwayne Allman had no reason to die that day. You know, he had just left the bank. He had just cashed a $5,000 check, was his first royalties from Fillmore East album. And he was on the way back to the big house because it was Big Linda Opie's birthday. And this pickup truck turned left right in front of him. And rather than laying his bike down like an experienced biker would have done, Dwayne had just gotten this Sportster that was delivered while we were rehearsing up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where we wrote Blue Sky, and Dickie was just starting to ramble, and there was a lot of other jams that are floating around from that. And that's where he took delivery of that Sportster. And man, I remember thinking, man, Dwayne just wasn't a good enough rider to have something like that. I mean, real extended fun. It was a thing of beauty, it really was. But I also knew it was a thing of death, and it turned out to be true. Instead of laying his bike down, Dwayne, in typical fashion in the way he lived, he just gunned his bike, shoot around the pickup truck, the dump truck. And the dump truck, the guy driving, he didn't see the motorcycle coming behind him. He saw a big pothole in the road and slammed on the brakes. And so where Dwayne thought he'd have an opening, he had a big hook that grabbed his bike, threw it way up in the air. He landed on the ground, the bike came down on top of it, and they slid 60 feet down the road. So, you know, by the time it was over with, his head was crushed, everything inside of him was crushed, and he was gone. And, hell, like I say, there's still a part of me that doesn't accept that, but it took me about 2 months after this day. And there are a lot of people around. You can see back there in the corner, that's Dwayne Bramlett. Dr. John's around. That's Dr. John right there playing the keyboards. Jerry Wexler, who was the president of Atlantic Records, got up and gave the eulogy. And he talked more about Dwayne and Layla and Derek and the Dominoes than he did about the Allman Brothers band. And then after the funeral was over, he went up to Phil Walden and he said, well, I guess that's it for the Allman Brothers. And, you know, if Phil Walden wasn't dead, I'd kill him. But he did. This is one of the few times where I was on right there with him. He said, well, I guess that's it for the Allman Brothers and Atlantic Records. So we left Atlantic Records, signed with Warner Brothers. The next one was Brothers and Sisters, was $3 million right out of the pocket, shot right to #1 on the charts, and Jerry Wexler and Ahmet Ertegun was sitting there looking like the idiots that they are, you know. And Warner Brothers is making a fortune, and for the first time we're actually making a little bit of money. And I mean, it went to #1, and to our horror, Ramblin' Man went to #2. A funny thing, you know what was #1 while we were #2? Half Breed by Cher. I mean, nobody knew what was coming, but, you know, y'all know that history, I'm sure. I mean, Cher is pretty much a big reason why the thing finally fell apart. In spite of that bullshit about Scooter Herring trial, it was Greg being in LA, thinking he was a rock star. We finished Win, Lose, or Draw in Macon, and we had to send the tapes out to LA where Greg put on the vocals. And that just wasn't the Allman Brothers. Never was, and we finally, that was, when the Scooter Hearing thing came, that just the straw that broke the camel's back. And we may be the only band in the history of the world that split up while we were the #1 band in the country. And I went back to Florida State University and enrolled as a freshman, where I took all of those courses I had failed the first time through. Chemistry lab, creative writing, meteorology, and I got myself in back door through the School of Music, talking to the percussion, head of the percussion department. My first term there, I made 5 A's and a C. Guess what the C was in? Percussion. Yeah. I mean, I got this little punk that's never been out of Tallahassee, Florida, giving me a damn C. You know? And I should have got an F. Because I knew damn good and well I ain't playing in the New York Philharmonic. So instead of practicing all this orchestral crap he was trying to show me, I was working on all the other subjects. The next semester, I made 5 A's and a B. So at least I got on the dean's list, but I never could ace drums. But my .8 that got me kicked out of Florida State University in 1967 became a 3.8, and that's the only reason I went back. That was good enough. I went out and started another band. I mean, I need a college degree like I need a hole in the head. Move on.
That's it, Butch.
Oh, I guess my story is over. If you want to stick around for a minute, I got a video to show you that's going to blow your mind, especially you drummers. If you want to leave, go, and that's okay. Thank you so much. I had a good time. I hope y'all did.